upload the file. Super simple. In fact, let me ask my first uploader tonight. Friend of the show, Southend poet David Pearman's here. David, it's good to have you back. How easy is it to upload?
Thank you. Yeah, very easy. Like you said, you just upload the file that you want to show off. Takes literal minutes, and then hopefully you get a message back from your producer
Yeah,
at some point.
exactly. It's either producer Adam or myself. We'll drop you a message directly. We'll email or even give you a quick call and just have a chat and invite you on the show because genuinely love it. I love the fact that I feel a bit powerful. I'm not gonna lie to you, being a bit cheeky here, but I feel a bit powerful that I have the ability to share art with people of all different formats. And the other thing I'll say is that please don't think you have to have a fancy studio set up to capture / record your work. You can do it on a mobile phone, a tablet, a laptop, dictaphone if you so wish. I don't know how we'd work that out, but there could be any method. And actually, David, I wondered if I might pick your brains quickly about how you record your poetry for us.
So this is the fourth time I've been on,
Yep.
and usually I just use the audio from my tablet. It's not the best in the world, but it's okay. But this is the first time that I'm using a proper microphone, so the audio should be a lot clearer. But yeah, like you said, it doesn't take fancy equipment to record audio. You know, sometimes it's just about the content rather than the quality.
It's absolutely about the content, not the quality of the recording. Now, if you have access to a kit that you can make it sound nice, please use it. Nothing will make me happier that you're getting to exercise some skills and things like that. But please also don't be put off because you don't have that stuff. If you've got a smartphone, you can record it on the voice note app in your phone and then just send the MP3 our way. So it can be as simple as that. Like you said, David, you did it on a tablet in the first place, and for us, that's more than enough. You've made that much effort. I'm not going to hold it against you that you've recorded it using a phone or a tablet. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here to share the content, and that's always a really key thing. I want to make people understand that that's the case, and it will always be the case with BBC Upload going forward as well. We sent this piece tonight that we're going to share, Old Block, Chip and Sawdust, in brackets. We'll find out a bit about the name in a moment. But you said you wrote this about your troubled relationship with your father, analysing similarities and differences between the two of you and sort of how it's influenced, or still influences you to this day, that relationship you did have. What prompted you to write a piece so personal?
Well, I think if I had to pick one influence in my life that's kind of influenced me the most, it would have to be my dad. Not always for the best of reasons, but I think I had so many different complicated relationships with him. There were so many different phases of my life where he was a part of it or not a part of it. When he was at home, it was kind of hard to have him around sometimes, and then he was made homeless, and then he got cancer, and then he passed away. And so for that reason, it was like there are so many different phases in which I knew my father, and I suppose I wrote this as a catharsis, or in a way. Sometimes those things just come out of you. It's not contrived or artificial. Sometimes you just need to write about those sorts of things. But there are things about my dad I'll never understand, why he was the way he was. But I think through poetry, I definitely kind of seek to bridge that gap and reconcile my father with how I knew him. And I think this poem kind of encapsulates that in a way.
David, I want to say thank you at this point, just early on, because I really appreciate the real sort of raw honesty you've shared in the piece that we're going to play in a moment, and that will become very evident when you hear it. It's very tangible. I was listening to it earlier this afternoon. Adam's obviously heard it as well, and actually we played it to our boss because we were both so impressed by the power it had over both Adam and I. And my boss was all like, "Yeah, that's really something." And I think everyone has a relationship with their parents.
Definitely.
And that sentence is meant as literal as it said. You have a relationship with with your parents that could be, well, probably an unlimited number. I won't even try to put a number on it. And everyone will feel differently when they hear others talking about theirs and such like that. But how much, when you were sat and writing it, how much did you tweak when you were going through it? Did it come out quite freely and sort of in one go, or was there much going back over it?
Sometimes on the rare occasion things come out like first time, and I very rarely do any tweaking, but I'm one of these people who obsesses over every single word and phrase, and I'm very, very pedantic in that respect. So
You're an
I
artist,
think
David. You're an artist, and there's nothing wrong with it.
I don't know about that. I'm obsessive maybe, but yeah, with this one, I mean, I wrote it so long ago. I wrote it about 6 years ago, but I think that was one of those ones where you never know how long a poem's going to be until you've written everything you feel like you need to write, and so for that reason, it could go on and on,
Yeah,
or it could just be really short. And this one, I think it's quite a long poem. I think, but I just remember kind of just wanting. I knew what I wanted to say, and I knew when it was finished and when it was going to be finished. And sometimes I have the start and the end before I have the middle parts.
yeah,
Um, because you know the story. If it's something a story you're familiar with, if it's your own life, you know the start and the end, but you sometimes have to remember how those two things bridge. How those two things are connected. So sometimes it's about going back and thinking, how did I get to this point? How did I get from there to here where I am now? And
yeah.
that's what I do with poems sometimes, I suppose.
So I assume, but you tell me I'm wrong, that when you wrote it, when you did sit down that first time to write it, whether it was in one sitting or not, you wrote it for yourself.
Yeah. I mean, it was a relationship between two people, and
Mm.
the only other person who was involved in that relationship isn't here anymore. So I suppose, yeah, it was for my benefit, my own catharsis. But funnily enough, I think last year I went to a poetry event, and I was just struck by the amount of people who were writing poems and reading poems about relationships with their parents. Like troubled relationships, especially boys with their fathers.
Mm.
And I was set to read this poem that you're going to play later, and um, it was just a coincidence that everyone else kind of had these poems about their own troubled relationships with their father, and I thought it just goes to show how ubiquitous this kind of issue is. The
Yeah.
the idea of having a distant relationship with a parent. It is more common than we think.
How long between writing it was there before you shared it with anyone?
Um, you know what I mean, with a poem like this, it seems like it would be extremely personal, and it is. It definitely is. But I don't think there's anything in there that I am ashamed of or embarrassed of. Um, so it wasn't that I kind of didn't want to share it with anyone because I was afraid what they might think. I think I just didn't really have a circle or a kind of network where I could put those things out there. So I think it was a couple of years after I wrote it before I shared it with anyone. But then again, I think I can say that about most of my poems. It's only in the last year or so that I've actually been putting them out there and sharing them, and getting a lot of great feedback.
Because when it's right, though, don't you? When you've made it, like, as in you created the piece, you sort of know, this is only this is for me, and actually this isn't something I'm going to share. And then maybe something happens, or someone says something, you're like, and it makes you think of that piece, and you go, now's the time to share this. Like, now feels like the right moment to get this out again, and go, hey, I wrote this poem. I wonder if you'd have a listen to it for me. And there's no rhyme or reason to that timeline. It just happens, or maybe doesn't happen as well.
Yeah.
I don't want to assume what the title was about. Like, I don't know. I will assume where it came from. But where did the sort of name Old Block, Chip and Sawdust in brackets come from?
So the title was actually longer, but I kind of
What was it originally then?
well, before the poem, you play my poems, you usually ask me to introduce them, and I kind of thought ahead and thought, do I really want to read the long title? It's actually Father was the old block, and I find myself somewhere in between the chip and the sawdust. So it's like a play on that old phrase, chip off the old
Chip
block.
off the old block. Yeah, yeah.
So I'm kind of debating whether I'm the chip or the sawdust, or whether I'm something in between, you know?
Yeah.
Am I a chip off the old block, or just the remnants of the sawdust? Or, you know, I was just trying to be really poetic about it, I suppose.
Firstly, you were poetic. You have been poetic with it. But David, I love the fact you found a loophole in the fact that you knew if I gave you the call to come on the show, I'd ask you to introduce it for us. That's very clever. And you say you're not an artist. You really are. You're already thinking about those sorts of things. Is there anywhere where we can find your work? We're going to share the piece in a moment. But is there anywhere else that people can find your work written or recorded?
Well, with my new microphone, I'm planning to upload some more stuff to my YouTube channel. So if anyone wants to check that out, that is David Poetry, and the icon, the display pic, is me wearing sunglasses. So, you know, you can't miss it. But yeah, that's about it, really.
It's a really beautiful piece, David. Adam and I both heard it, both said this is, you know, it's emotive. I'm not going to lie to you. You know, if you're not feeling particularly stable in your own self at the moment, quite emotionally charged, this might touch a little sort of sensitivity. But don't let that be reason not to listen to it. And I do also offer a very public apology to you, David, because you've used a word which is perfectly legitimate to use in this, but I'm always conscious that there might be some small ears listening. So I have. Obviously, you'll know exactly where it is. I have made a small edit to one word in the piece, but I'm pretty sure people will hear it, know which words you're intending here, David. So I don't like editing art. I don't honestly believe in doing it, but I'm also aware of my responsibility on BBC Essex as well. And I wouldn't want anyone to have to explain what it is and, you know, have a difficult conversation at 8:30 of an evening as well. But
totally get it, man.
But it means a lot to me that people share their art, and I don't have any right or authority to make any changes to it either, and I don't believe in doing that. So we've made what's necessary change, so there isn't the word, but you'll get what it is when you arrive there. Once again, it's always a pleasure having you on, David. Thank you so much for coming back. I do appreciate it.
But
as you already know what I'm going to do, will you, before you go, introduce your piece, please?
Yes. So my name is David Pearman, and this is the poem I wrote called Chip and Sawdust, Old Block.
What fatherless son invents his own version of what he thinks a man is supposed to be, and creates one that's of a perfect person with not a hint of trauma imposed on he? What shape that outgrows the boy but not his flaws leaves space enough for the virtues of a man, when there's wisdom in the unrest between two shores for him to see, but the unrest is all that he can. My father was unripe, a boy of 17 when his father died. I saw the revelations when my own father died. I was 23. The same cold waters spanned 2 generations. And there were no stones, just the palest of skeletons, and from their bones castles rose from the river that is time. But they know better, the veterans, than to look back, lest they each become a pillar. Here I stand, however, salt and callow, armed with the bittersweet palate of remembrance, wading in waters that may only be shallow. My feet succumb still to the current's temperance. Now the same old nightmares full of violence, and the same old adolescent dreams of smut, spill over my cup, not to fill the silence, but to leave my insides with nothing but. Behold the sea change in the wake of departures, but how does one depart the abandoned carriage when one plants the seeds of neglected pastures? The little blossom belie the marriage and become the hard fruit picked before their time. To his love a man declares, I will not feel you, for then your pain would be mine, just as mine will be yours. Tell me then, how could I kill you? I recall the 23 years preceding my father's death. He was, whenever present, unpleasant, and when not, I was just bleeding, starved of convention, an unconventional peasant, begging for just the tincture of some normality. I held out my cup and watched it fill up with rain, and whilst at the houses of my friends their reality made me question as a child why mine was not the same. Now what's there to say for the state of posterity? My sister is a weed, and I a broken seed. Though our name will not die for my uncle's legacy, his boys grew up right with a respectable creed. I could never steal a soul from the antimatter state, regardless of a fate in an empty picture frame, just to pass on my hate and every messed up trait to a child who would do well not to do the same. Success is to be unsucceeded in name. In a sea of famous ones my father's dissolves, and as his namesake, the man who succeeded him in vain, I ponder the limit of where this sameness revolves. The toothy grin trademarked, a glint in the gaze. Though time has made not a beggar of similarity, what irks me is the anger that fuels my turn of phrase when I raise my voice and do away with disparity. I am a child of man, and men are but children with addictions. For mine, if I were to hold my hands up, his shoes I would have already filled them, twice and thrice over, just for being so bold. But aren't I so bold to condemn all these wicked ways, when that same wickedness still moves in my own? If trauma is the bullet that endlessly ricochets, then maybe there's a dignity in dying alone. If somebody told me that before I existed, my parents were happy once, I'd try to imagine. Hard, but hardly impossible, it consisted of more once, I'm sure, but what became of their passion? I would often look into my father's eyes and scour for any kind of spark, but all I found was my own. If there was ever life in that long wilted flower, it left with the honeybee and fell like a stone.
Southend poet David Pearman with Old Block, Chip and Sawdust on BBC Upload.